There is a moment when life has ended, but the journey may not be over. The body becomes still, the home is left behind. The people you loved can no longer hear your voice. Your name, your plans, your unfinished desires, everything that once felt permanent suddenly belongs to the world behind you. And then comes the doorway. Not a place we can prove with our eyes, but a powerful Vedic-inspired image of transition, the point where attachment begins to loosen, identity begins to fall away, and the soul may have to face what comes next. But here is the question that makes this journey unsettling. What if the hardest thing is not crossing into the next life, but releasing the one you just left? Welcome to the Soul at the Doorway. Stay until Chapter 7, because the deepest mystery may not be what waits beyond death. It may be what the soul must finally leave behind before it can move forward. Chapter 1. The moment the familiar world falls away. There is a moment every human being knows will come, but almost no one feels ready for. The final breath. The body becomes still. The room remains. The home remains. The family remains. The name remains. But the person who spent years saying, "This is my life," can no longer live it in the same way. And this is where the doorway begins. For decades, identity is built through repetition. You wake in the same body, you hear the same name, you answer to the same relationships, you make plans for tomorrow as though tomorrow belongs to you. Slowly, the temporary starts feeling permanent. This is my body, this is my family, this is my home, this is my future. Then death arrives and reveals how fragile the word "my" always was. Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, death may end the body in a moment, but the impressions of a lifetime do not become meaningless just as quickly. The habits, fears, desires, attachments, and emotional patterns a person practiced for years have already shaped consciousness. This is where samskaras become important. A samskara is like an inner impression created through repeated experience and emotion. You may forget where a fear began, but still carry the fear. You may forget when an attachment formed, but still feel its grip. Now imagine something much greater. The entire physical life through which those patterns were expressed has suddenly ended. The body has stopped, but attachment may still be facing backward. The house is still there. The people are still there. The unfinished plans are still there. The future imagined yesterday may still feel emotionally real, even though it can no longer happen in the same way. This may be the first great shock at the doorway. The outer life has ended, but the inner momentum has not necessarily become silent. Think about someone who lived in the same home for 40 years. Every room carries memory. Every doorway carries habit. Every familiar voice is tied to identity. Can decades of familiarity simply become nothing in 1 second? Perhaps this is why some Vedic-inspired traditions imagine the early transition after death as a period where consciousness may still feel connected to what was known. Not because we can prove that a departed soul is literally walking through the old home, but because familiarity has power. Attachment has momentum, and perhaps the first mystery of death is this: the body may know how to stop before the mind knows how to release. This is why death is not only the end of physical movement, it is the collapse of identity. A person was a father, a mother, a husband, a wife, a friend, a provider, a teacher. These roles felt real because they were repeated every day. Then suddenly, the body that carried those roles is gone. What happens to the identity that depended on them? This is where the first layer begins to fall away. The name was important, but the name was not eternal. The body was precious, but the body was temporary. The home mattered, but the home was borrowed. The relationships were sacred, but their physical form could never last forever. This truth can sound heavy, but it carries a powerful lesson for the living. Impermanence does not make love meaningless. It makes love urgent. If the people around you were guaranteed forever, you could keep postponing everything important. You could always say, tomorrow. Tomorrow I will apologize. Tomorrow I will spend time with them. Tomorrow I will say what I really feel. But death exposes the danger of delay. A conversation with someone you love is valuable precisely because it may not repeat forever. A normal morning at home is sacred because one day it will become memory. This is why the doorway is not speaking only to the dead. It is speaking to you. What are you treating as permanent simply because it has been there for a long time? Your health? Your family? Your relationship? Your plans? Your youth? The mind confuses repetition with permanence. But something happening many times does not guarantee that it will happen again. That realization can change how you live. You stop wasting as much time trying to win meaningless arguments. You become quicker to say thank you, quicker to forgive, quicker to sit with the people who matter. This is the deeper purpose of non-attachment, not to love less, to stop wasting love because you think you have unlimited time. Love deeply, build your life, care for your family. But remember that none of these forms can be held forever. One day, the doorway will ask a simple question of everything you call mine. Can you leave it? And perhaps the answer is shaped long before death. Every small release is practice. Every resentment you stop feeding, every failure you accept, every person you stop trying to control, every time you remember that love is not ownership. These moments train consciousness for change. And death is the greatest change. This is also why unfinished plans can carry so much emotional weight. A person can die with tomorrow still alive in the mind. There may be meetings scheduled, messages unanswered, promises unfinished, dreams not completed. The calendar can remain full after the person is gone. That is one of death's most powerful lessons. The future you imagine is not guaranteed. So if something truly matters, stop assuming there will always be more time. Say the important words now. Repair what can be repaired now. Live with greater honesty now. Because perhaps the doorway does not ask what you plan to become. It reveals what you actually practiced becoming. And this is the first golden truth of the soul at the doorway. When the familiar world falls away, the soul may discover that almost everything it called mine was temporary. But the impressions created through the way it lived may already have gone much deeper. So perhaps the question is not only, what will I lose when I reach the doorway? The deeper question is, who am I becoming before I have to let everything go? Chapter 2. Why the soul may look back before it can move forward. Leaving the body may be one thing. Leaving the life behind may be much harder. Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, this is where attachment becomes one of the deepest parts of the transition. A person may have spent decades loving the same people, protecting the same family, worrying about the same home, repeating the same routines, and identifying with the same relationships. So when physical life ends, why would the inner pull toward all of that disappear instantly? Perhaps it does not. Perhaps the soul symbolically looks back before it can face forward. Not because we can prove that every departed soul literally returns to every room or watches every family member, but because love, habit, responsibility, and attachment can become powerful samskaras. The body may be gone, yet the impressions formed through a lifetime may still carry emotional weight. Think about a mother who spent years worrying about her children, a father who built his identity around protecting his family, a person who lived in one home for most of their life, a husband or wife whose entire daily world was shared with another person. These are not small habits, they become part of the inner story, and this is where the doorway becomes difficult. Behind the soul is everything familiar, the people who knew its name, the rooms that carried memory, the responsibilities that once gave life structure. The head is mystery, and human consciousness usually prefers the familiar, even when the familiar can no longer continue. This may be why the soul is imagined as turning backward first, because the unknown does not yet feel like home. The old life does. But there is something even deeper here. Love and attachment are not the same. Love says, "You matter to me." Attachment says, "I cannot exist without you remaining exactly as you are." That difference becomes enormous at death. A family may still be loved, but possession can no longer continue. A home may still be meaningful, but the old relationship with that home has ended. The soul may still carry the impression of belonging, but the form of belonging has changed. This is why spiritual traditions often emphasize peaceful remembrance rather than desperate clinging. The living naturally want to say, "Do not leave us," but a deeper kind of love may eventually say, "You mattered deeply, and I will not turn my fear into a chain." That is not forgetting. That is release. And perhaps the same lesson belongs to the soul. The old life does not need to become meaningless. It only needs to stop being the place where the journey ends. This is important because many people confuse moving forward with betrayal. If the family begins healing, they may feel guilty. If the soul is imagined as moving on, some may think that means love has ended. But love does not need to disappear for movement to happen. The form changes. That is all. A relationship can remain meaningful without remaining physically active. A person can remain deeply loved without the old life continuing. This is why memory becomes powerful. The body is gone, but influence remains. The words remain. The lessons remain. The way someone treated you remains. The habits they gave you remain. The love they showed may continue shaping you long after the body is no longer present. In this sense, people leave impressions inside one another. And that may be one of the most meaningful ways to understand continuations. The soul may not need to hold the house forever. The house has already done its work. The soul may not need to hold every role forever. The roles have already shaped experience. The soul may not need to remain turned toward the past forever. The past has already left its mark. This is where the second chapter becomes a turning point. The soul may look back because the old life mattered. But eventually, love must become strong enough to survive without possession. And perhaps this is the second golden truth of the soul at the doorway. The soul may look back not because it is meant to stay, but because everything it loved is still teaching it how to let go. The family may still be loved. The home may still feel familiar. The old identity may still carry emotional weight. But the doorway does not open backward, it opens forward. And perhaps the real question is not, why does the soul still look back? It is, what must change inside before it is ready to stop looking back? Chapter 3. The unfinished things that may follow you to the threshold. Not everyone arrives at death feeling complete. Some people leave with apologies never spoken, promises never fulfilled, dreams interrupted, relationships unresolved, responsibilities unfinished, and words that remained trapped inside the heart for years. This is where the doorway becomes heavier. Because the body may stop, but the emotional force behind unfinished things can be powerful. Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, this is where desire, attachment, samskaras, and karma begin to matter more deeply. A person does not only carry memories through life, they also carry tendencies, repeated fears, repeated desires, repeated regrets, repeated thoughts about what must happen before they can finally feel at peace. And when death arrives before those expectations are fulfilled, the inner momentum may not simply become meaningless. Imagine someone who spent years saying, "I will apologize later. I will forgive when I am ready. I will tell them how I feel tomorrow. I will slow down when I have enough money. I will start living once this problem is over." Then suddenly, tomorrow never comes in the way they expected. This is one of the most powerful lessons hidden inside death. A life can end while the mind is still making plans. The calendar can remain full. The messages can remain unanswered. The dream can remain unfinished. The person can be gone while the future they imagined still exists in everyone else's memory. This is why unfinished desire can feel like weight. Not because every unfinished task becomes some supernatural chain. That would be too simplistic. The deeper weight may be the attachment formed around the unfinished thing. A person may not simply want to complete a dream. They may believe, I cannot be whole unless I complete it. They may not simply want forgiveness. They may believe, I cannot have peace unless this person gives it to me. They may not simply love someone. They may believe, I cannot exist without this relationship continuing exactly as I want. That is where desire becomes bondage, and the doorway exposes it. This is why samskaras are so important in this chapter. A samskara is not just a memory. It is a pattern impressed deeply enough that it influences what you automatically feel, fear, expect, and choose. If you spend 20 years feeding resentment, resentment becomes familiar. If you spend decades needing approval, approval becomes part of your emotional survival. If you spend a lifetime believing your worth depends on success, then success stops being a goal and becomes identity. So when death removes the outer world, the question becomes, what happens to the patterns that were practiced for years? Within traditions that accept continuation beyond death, some understand these tendencies as part of what gives the journey momentum. Again, this is not something we can prove in every invisible detail, but the spiritual principle is powerful. What you practice repeatedly becomes part of you. That is true even before death. A person who repeatedly responds with anger becomes quicker to anger. A person who repeatedly practices patience strengthens patience. A person who spends years clinging becomes more practiced at clinging. A person who learns how to release becomes more practiced at release. This is why the doorway should make the living pay attention. You are creating tendencies now, every day, not only through dramatic decisions, through ordinary repetition. The way you speak when annoyed, the way you respond when someone disappoints you, the way you treat people when they cannot give you anything, the way you handle failure, the way you handle praise, the way you respond when something you wanted does not happen. These moments are shaping your inner life, and perhaps the final doorway reveals how deeply those patterns have become rooted. This is where karma should be understood carefully. Karma is often reduced to the idea of punishment, but in a more useful sense, karma is action and consequence. What you repeatedly do shapes what comes next. Your choices create results outside you and tendencies inside you. If you lie repeatedly, you shape trust around you and deception within you. If you practice compassion, you shape relationships around you and compassion within you. The action ends, the effect continues. This is why unfinished things matter. Sometimes what remains unfinished outside has already become powerful inside. Take resentment. The argument may have happened 10 years ago. The other person may have forgotten it. But if you replay it every week, then the event is over while the samskara is still being strengthened. This is important. The past may be finished in time, but unfinished in consciousness. And perhaps this is exactly the kind of weight the doorway reveals. Not necessarily the event, the grip, the sentence you keep repeating, the demand you refuse to release, the identity built around the wound. This is why forgiveness becomes spiritually important. Forgiveness does not mean pretending harm was acceptable. It does not mean allowing someone to hurt you again. It means refusing to let one event keep controlling your inner life forever. That is release. And if death can come before the story feels complete, then perhaps learning to release without perfect closure is one of the deepest skills a person can develop. Because many things in life will never receive perfect closure. Some people will never apologize. Some questions will never be answered. Some relationships will end without explanation. Some dreams will remain unfinished. If peace depends on everything being completed exactly as you hoped, peace becomes impossible. This is where the doorway teaches a stronger truth. Not everything unfinished needs to remain unresolved inside you. That is powerful. You may never get the final conversation, but you can release the need to keep rehearsing it. You may never receive the apology, but you can stop allowing the absence of that apology to define your life. You may never achieve the dream, but you can refuse to believe that the unfinished dream makes you unfinished. This is where desire changes into wisdom. The problem is not wanting. The problem is believing the fulfillment of one desire is required for your soul to be complete. There is a difference between "I deeply want this" and "I cannot be at peace without this." The first is human. The second creates chains. Death makes those chains visible because many desires suddenly become impossible to fulfill in the old way. The promotion no longer matters. The argument no longer matters. The need to impress someone no longer matters. The possession you were fighting over remains behind. The doorway forces a brutal question. Why did this have so much power over me? That question should not wait until death. Ask it now. What are you allowing to control your peace? One person's opinion? One failure? One rejection? One goal? One resentment? One relationship? Sometimes we call these things important, when what we really mean is that we have become dependent on them, and dependency becomes obvious when we imagine losing them. This is why contemplating death can be clarifying. It removes exaggeration. Imagine you knew you had 1 week left. Would the argument you are carrying still deserve so much energy? Would the person who ignored your message still control your mood? Would you still spend hours comparing your life with strangers? Would you still postpone saying, "I love you"? Would you still keep waiting to apologize because your pride refuses to go first? These questions reveal what matters. This is not about becoming dramatic or fearful. It is about using mortality to destroy unnecessary delay. Because one of the saddest things about unfinished lives is that so much is postponed for reasons that look tiny afterward. A person refuses to speak to a sibling for years over an old argument. Then death comes. Now the argument is still there, but the opportunity is gone. Someone wants to tell their parent they are grateful but feels awkward. They keep waiting. Then the chance ends. Someone works endlessly believing that rest, family, and joy can happen later. Then later arrives in a form they never expected. This is why the doorway should make you more honest. Do not wait for the end to discover that pride costs too much. Do not wait for silence to value conversation. Do not wait for absence to understand presence. There is another kind of unfinished desire that is more hidden, the desire to become someone you never allowed yourself to become. Perhaps you always wanted to create something, to live more simply, to become more spiritual, to leave a life that was draining you, to become more honest. But fear kept you waiting. Then years passed. This too can become weight. Not because everyone must complete every dream, but because constantly betraying your own values creates inner conflict. This is where Dharma becomes important. Dharma can be understood as the responsibility, truth, or way of living that belongs to you in the present. The doorway asks, did you live according to what you knew mattered? Or did you spend your life postponing yourself? That question is difficult, but it is also liberating because you are still alive enough to respond. You can change something. Now, not everything, but something. You can speak, you can forgive, you can stop feeding one destructive habit. You can repair one relationship. You can begin one meaningful practice. The doorway has not arrived yet. That matters. This chapter is not asking you to fear unfinished things. It is asking you to stop creating unnecessary ones. And it is asking you to recognize that sometimes the completion you want is not external, it is internal. You think closure means the other person must say the right words. Maybe closure is deciding you will no longer wait for those words. You think completion means finishing the dream. Maybe completion is understanding what the dream taught you. You think peace means the past must change. Maybe peace begins when you stop demanding that the past become something it can no longer become. This is one of the strongest forms of non-attachment, and it becomes especially meaningful at the doorway. because the soul, within this Vedic-inspired metaphor, may have to face a world where many old demands cannot be fulfilled. The question is no longer, how do I make everything happen? It becomes, what am I willing to release because it can no longer happen? This is where the journey deepens. The doorway is not only between life and death, it is between demand and acceptance, between this must be completed and this can remain unfinished without imprisoning me, between the old story and the possibility of movement. And perhaps the third golden truth of the soul at the doorway is this: the heaviest thing at the threshold may not be what you failed to finish, it may be what you still refuse to release. The unfinished conversation may remain unfinished. The dream may remain incomplete. The apology may never come. But the grip can change. The demand can soften. The identity built around the wound can loosen. And when that happens, something powerful becomes possible. The soul, within this spiritual image, is no longer standing at the doorway trying to drag the entire unfinished life through with it. It begins to understand. Some things belong to the life behind. Some lessons can be carried. Some attachments cannot. And that is where the threshold begins to open. Chapter 4. When the soul stands between identity and mystery, there is a point in this journey where the old life can no longer define the soul in the same way. But what comes next is still hidden. This is the doorway. Behind it is everything familiar: the body, the name, the family, the home, the work, the memories, the unfinished plans. Ahead is mystery. And that may be the most difficult place of all. Because while we are alive, identity is easy to build. We say, I am this person, I belong to these people, I live in this place, I do this work. The world constantly reflects an identity back to us. But at the doorway, those reflections begin disappearing. The body can no longer answer for you. The job can no longer define you. The house can no longer prove where you belong. The family can remember you, but they cannot keep the old role alive in the same physical way. So the deeper question begins. Who are you when everything that used to define you is falling away? Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, this is where the distinction between outer identity and deeper consciousness becomes important. The outer identity is temporary. It has a name, a face, a history, a role, a set of relationships. But if consciousness continues beyond death, then the old personality may not be the whole story. This is where samskaras and karma become meaningful again. The name may fall away, the title may fall away, the possessions may remain behind, but the tendencies shaped through a lifetime may still matter within this spiritual framework. How did you respond to fear? What did you repeatedly desire? Did you practice compassion or cruelty? Did you hold tightly to resentment? Did you learn to release? These patterns may reveal more about the inner life than any social label ever did. This is why the doorway is so powerful. It strips away the things that made identity easy, and what remains has to face mystery without the old supports. That can be frightening. Human beings love certainty. We want to know where we are, who we are, what happens next. But the doorway offers none of that clearly. It asks for something different. Trust, not blind certainty. Not pretending we know exactly what happens after death. But trust that change is part of existence, and that the old form does not need to continue forever for the journey to have meaning. This is also where attachment to identity becomes visible. Some people are deeply attached to being admired, some to being needed, some to being powerful, some to being the victim, some to being successful. These identities may feel permanent because they were repeated for years, but the doorway makes all of them temporary. You cannot carry social status through it. You cannot carry other people's opinions. You cannot carry the role you played forever. And perhaps this is where the soul begins understanding that identity was always more fragile than it seemed. This is not meant to make life feel meaningless. It is meant to make you ask what part of your life is deeper than performance. If nobody praised you, would you still know who you are? If your job disappeared, would your life still have meaning? If your body changed, would your worth disappear? If one relationship ended, would your entire identity collapse? These questions belong to the living because you can still work with the answers. You do not have to wait until death to loosen false identity. You can begin now. You can stop building your worth entirely around approval. You can stop pretending one role is the whole of you. You can stop letting one failure define your life. This is spiritual freedom, not the destruction of personality, but the understanding that personality is a vehicle, not necessarily the whole of consciousness. And perhaps this is exactly what the soul encounters at the doorway. The vehicle has been left behind. Now the deeper pattern stands exposed. This is also where fear of the unknown can become stronger than attachment to the past. Sometimes people remain emotionally stuck in painful situations because the pain is familiar. The unknown feels worse. The same principle makes the doorway a powerful metaphor. The old life has ended, but at least it was known. The next state is unknown. So the soul, symbolically, may feel the pull to look backward, but the doorway does not open backward. That is the lesson. There are moments when the only movement possible is forward, even when forward cannot yet be understood. This is true in life too. A relationship ends, a career ends, a version of yourself ends. You may keep looking backward because the old identity feels safer than the new one. But eventually, you have to face what comes next. This is why the doorway between life and death is also a doorway inside every major transformation. Something ends. Identity becomes unstable. Mystery appears. Then you have to decide whether to remain attached to what was or become willing to move. Within Vedic-inspired thought, this movement is connected to non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean rejecting the past. It means refusing to let the past become the only place you can exist. The soul may still love, still remember, still carry impressions, but perhaps it must stop demanding that the old life continue exactly as it was. That is where mystery becomes possible. And there is another important truth here. The doorway may not only ask, "What are you leaving?" It may ask, "What are you carrying inside?" Not your possessions, your tendencies, your awareness, your attachments, your patterns. That is why how you live matters. A person can spend an entire life collecting things that stay behind, while ignoring the inner qualities that shape consciousness. This is the great reversal of the doorway. What looked important outside becomes smaller. What seemed invisible inside becomes larger. Your wealth may remain behind, but greed may have shaped you. Your status may remain behind, but arrogance may have shaped you. Your relationships may change form, but love, attachment, resentment, and compassion may have already left deep impressions. This is why the spiritual question is not only what happens to the soul after death. It is, what kind of soul are you shaping while alive? That question is stronger because it gives you responsibility now. You can change your patterns. You can practice awareness. You can become less reactive. You can soften resentment. You can become more honest. You can learn to hold things more lightly. Every one of these choices shapes the inner life. This is why Chapter 4 is the true center of the soul at the doorway. The soul stands between two realities. One is known but finished. The other is unknown but open. The old identity is weakening. The deeper mystery is beginning. And perhaps the doorway is not asking the soul to know everything. Perhaps it is asking for readiness. Readiness to release what cannot continue. Readiness to trust what cannot yet be understood. Readiness to stop using the old life as the only definition of existence. And this is the fourth golden truth. The doorway may not be frightening because something terrible waits beyond it. It may be frightening because everything familiar can no longer tell you who you are. That is the real mystery. Not only what comes next, but who remains when the old story ends. And perhaps the soul can move forward only when it no longer needs the old world to answer that question. Chapter 5. Why attachment may be the last wait at the doorway. By now, the soul has left behind almost everything that once made life feel solid. The body can no longer be used. The home can no longer be entered in the same way. The old role can no longer continue. The future that once felt certain has disappeared. And yet one thing may still remain powerful: attachment. Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, attachment is not the same as love. Love can be deep, generous, and free. Attachment says something different. Attachment says, I need this to remain exactly as it is, or I cannot be complete. That is why attachment may become one of the heaviest things at the doorway. A person may have loved their family deeply. That love is not the problem. The problem begins when love becomes possession. My child must always remain mine. My partner must never leave. My home is who I am. My status proves my worth. My body is the whole of me. These thoughts may feel normal during life because they are repeated every day. But at the doorway, everything built around mine begins losing its power. This is where death reveals a truth we spend most of life avoiding. You were allowed to hold many things. You were never promised that you could keep them forever. That includes the body, the relationship, the house, the position, the possessions, the plans. And perhaps the soul's deepest struggle at the doorway is not simply losing them. It is realizing they were never permanent enough to become the whole of identity. Think about how strongly the word mine shapes life. People destroy relationships over property. They sacrifice health for status. They become jealous because they believe another person belongs to them. They spend decades chasing approval because their identity depends on how others see them. Then death comes and asks, what exactly did you truly own? The house remains behind. Someone else sleeps there. The money changes hands. Someone else spends it. The possessions are divided, stored, donated, forgotten, or thrown away. The body itself returns to nature, and suddenly the word mine becomes much quieter. This may be one of the strongest spiritual revelations at the doorway. The things you fought to control are no longer available to control. And perhaps that is when attachment begins showing its real weight. Not because the object itself follows you, because the inner demand may still be active. I cannot release this. I need to stay. I need one more chance. I need them to remember me. I need this story to continue. That inner demand is what turns love into bondage. This is why non-attachment is so important in Vedic-inspired thought. Non-attachment does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean loving your family less. It does not mean giving away everything and refusing to care. It means understanding the difference between appreciation and possession. You can love fully and still know that forms change. You can care deeply and still know that one day separation will come. You can build a beautiful life and still understand that life cannot be frozen. This kind of awareness changes the way you hold everything. You stop gripping with fear. You begin holding with gratitude. That difference is enormous. Fear says, do not change. Gratitude says, thank you for being here while you are here. Fear says, you belong to me. Love says, you matter to me. Fear says, if I lose this, I lose myself. Wisdom says, this is precious, but it is not the whole of who I am. This is the kind of freedom attachment resists. And perhaps that is why the doorway becomes difficult. The soul may be standing at the threshold while part of the old identity still wants to turn around. There is the family, the house, the unfinished dream, the person who was never forgiven, the achievement that was never reached, the role that gave meaning. All of it pulls backward, but the doorway asks for a different movement, not denial, release. And release is not the same as forgetting. This is crucial. If a soul releases attachment to family, that does not mean love disappears. If a grieving family slowly releases the deceased, that does not mean the person becomes unimportant. Release means the relationship with what happened changes. The heart stops saying, "This must remain exactly as it was," and begins saying, "This mattered deeply, but I accept that its form has changed." That sentence contains enormous spiritual strength. Many people cannot say it even while alive. They hold on to relationships that ended years ago. They hold on to resentment long after the event is over. They hold on to identities that no longer fit them. They keep saying, "This should still be mine," even when life has already moved. This is why death is not the only doorway where attachment matters. Every major change asks the same question. Can you release what has ended without pretending it never mattered? A relationship ends. Can you carry the lesson without carrying the chain? A career ends. Can you keep your dignity without believing your entire identity has died? Youth passes. Can you accept age without treating yourself as worthless? Someone you love dies. Can you grieve without making grief the only way to prove your love? These are all forms of the same spiritual training. The doorway after death simply makes the lesson impossible to avoid. And this is why practicing non-attachment while alive matters so much. Every time you release a smaller thing consciously, you strengthen the ability to meet change. You lose an argument and stop needing to win. You lose an opportunity and continue without becoming bitter. You lose approval and refuse to abandon your self-respect. You lose an object and remember that your peace is worth more than possession. These are not tiny exercises, they are rehearsals. They teach the mind, I can let go without disappearing. That may be one of the most important lessons anyone can practice, because attachment often whispers, if you release this, nothing will remain. But that is not always true. Sometimes release reveals what was underneath the attachment. You release control and discover trust. You release resentment and discover space. You release the need to be admired and discover a quieter sense of worth. You release one impossible future and discover another direction. Perhaps the soul at the doorway experiences something similar within the spiritual metaphor. The old life may feel like everything, because it is the only life the personality remembers. But perhaps moving forward requires discovering that existence is not limited to the identity that just ended. This is where fear and attachment meet. People cling because the unknown is frightening. The known may be gone, but at least it was familiar. That is why someone can stay emotionally attached to pain, simply because pain is known. And perhaps the doorway magnifies this tendency. Behind the soul is a complete history, ahead is mystery. The temptation to look backward is understandable. But there comes a point when looking backward no longer changes anything. The body will not become available again in the same form. The old day will not restart. The unfinished conversation will not return exactly as it was. The doorway does not open backward. This is where acceptance becomes necessary. Not because the old life was unimportant, because it was complete in the form it had. This is a subtle but powerful difference. Completion does not mean every plan succeeded. Completion does not mean every relationship healed. Completion does not mean every desire was fulfilled. A life can be complete as a lifetime, even when many things inside it remained unfinished. That may be one of the hardest truths to accept. We often think peace will come only when everything is resolved. But life rarely offers perfect resolution. Some questions remain unanswered. Some people never apologize. Some dreams stay incomplete. Some endings feel unfair. So if peace depends on perfect closure, peace may never come. This is why release becomes stronger than closure. Closure asks, did everything end perfectly? Release asks, can I stop demanding that it did? That difference can free a person while alive. And perhaps, symbolically, it can also free the soul at the doorway. There is another kind of attachment that may be even deeper than possession. Attachment to identity. A person may spend decades believing, I am important because people need me. I am worthy because I am successful. I am lovable because someone chooses me. I matter because I am respected. Then death removes the entire social structure supporting those beliefs. No applause, no title, no reputation to protect, no role to perform. This can be imagined as one of the deepest forms of stripping away. Because the soul may not simply need to release the world, it may need to release the version of itself that existed only through the world. That is far more difficult. Who are you when nobody is calling your name? Who are you when nobody is praising or criticizing you? Who are you when there is no job to prove value? Who are you when there is no body to decorate, defend, or compare? These questions reveal why spiritual practice often turns inward. It trains awareness to recognize something beneath constant performance. This does not require pretending we know exactly what survives death, but it does create a powerful lesson. Do not build your entire worth upon things that can disappear overnight. This is why the strongest attachment may not be to money or family. It may be to the story of me, the identity, the biography, the idea that existence must continue exactly according to the personality's demands. And perhaps the doorway cannot fully open until that story begins loosening too. This is the fifth golden truth of the soul at the doorway. Perhaps the last weight at the threshold is not the world itself. It is the belief that the soul must remain the same person it was inside that world. The house can remain behind. The body can remain behind. The possessions can remain behind. Even unfinished desires can remain behind. But the deepest release may be this: I no longer need everything behind me to tell me who I am. That is where attachment begins turning into freedom, and perhaps only then does the doorway stop looking like something that takes everything away. Perhaps it begins looking like something that asks the soul to put down what it was never meant to carry forever. Chapter 6. What karma may mean at the threshold. By the time the soul reaches the symbolic doorway, almost everything external has already lost its power. The body cannot be carried forward in the same form. The house stays behind. The money stays behind. The social identity begins fading. The roles that once seemed permanent no longer function in the same way. Even the unfinished dreams of the old life begin losing their authority. And this raises one of the deepest questions in the entire audiobook. If almost everything stays behind, what may still matter? Within a Vedic-inspired understanding, this is where karma becomes impossible to ignore. Karma is often misunderstood as punishment, as though there is some invisible force waiting to reward good people and strike bad people. But that view is too simple. At its deepest, karma is about action, consequence, tendency, and the way repeated choices shape the inner life. Every action does something twice. It changes the world around you, and it changes something inside you. When you repeatedly respond with anger, anger becomes easier. When you repeatedly practice compassion, compassion becomes more natural. When you lie again and again, deception becomes familiar. When you tell the truth even when it costs you something, integrity becomes stronger. The action may last only a moment, but the impression can remain. This is where karma and samskaras meet. Karma creates consequence. Samskaras preserve the imprint. And over time, those imprints become tendencies that shape how you react to life without even thinking. This is why two people can face the same situation and respond completely differently. One becomes bitter, another becomes wiser. One becomes cruel after pain. Another becomes compassionate because they understand pain. The event may be similar, the inner pattern is different. And that pattern was not created in one moment. It was built through repetition. This is what makes the threshold so powerful. At the doorway, the person can no longer hide behind appearance. No wealth can disguise greed. No reputation can erase cruelty. No public praise can cancel what was repeatedly practiced in private. No religious language can replace actual character. The old world may have been impressed by titles. The doorway is not. The old world may have cared about status. The doorway strips status away. The old world may have rewarded performance. The doorway exposes pattern. That is a frightening thought if your life has been built around how you appear. But it is a liberating thought if you have been quietly trying to become better. Because perhaps what matters most is not whether everyone recognized your goodness. Perhaps what matters is what repeated goodness made you become. This is why karma is so closely tied to character. Suppose two people both give charity. One gives only to be admired. The other gives because another person's suffering genuinely matters to them. The outward action may look similar, but the inner tendency may not be the same. One strengthens the need for praise. The other strengthens compassion. This is why motive matters. And this is where karma becomes deeper than a list of actions. It is not only what you did, it is what you repeatedly became through doing it. This should make you ask a difficult question. What are you becoming through the way you live every day? Not what do you say you believe, not what do you want people to think about you. What are you actually practicing? If someone insults you, what do you practice? Patience or revenge? If you become successful, what do you practice? Gratitude or arrogance? If someone you love disappoints you, what do you practice? Honest communication or punishment? If you lose something, what do you practice? Acceptance or endless bitterness? These small moments matter because they create the inner direction of a life, and perhaps within traditions that accept continuity beyond death. This is why karma is understood as something more enduring than possession. You cannot carry your house through the doorway, but the greed you practiced while protecting it may have shaped you. You cannot carry your reputation, but the arrogance you developed because of it may have become an inner tendency. You cannot carry your money, but generosity or selfishness may already have changed your character. You cannot carry the relationship in the same form, but the love, attachment, jealousy, patience, or control you practiced through that relationship may have left deep impressions. This is why the question at the doorway is not, what did you own? It is, what did ownership make you become? That question is far more powerful. A person may have lived in poverty and still become deeply generous. Another may have possessed everything and become terrified of losing it. One may have been praised by thousands and still lived through insecurity. Another may have been barely noticed and still cultivated peace. The outer life does not tell the whole story. The inner pattern matters. This is one reason Vedic-inspired teachings about karma should not be used to judge people casually. You cannot always see another person's inner journey. You do not know every circumstance. You do not know every struggle. You do not know every motive. Karma should first turn your attention inward. What are you strengthening in yourself? That is the useful question. Because the doorway is personal. Nobody else can practice awareness for you. Nobody else can forgive on your behalf. Nobody else can build your character while you remain unconscious. The world can advise you, teach you, warn you, but the repetition belongs to you. And this is why the threshold exposes responsibility. For much of life, people blame circumstances for everything they become. My family made me this way. My partner made me angry. My past made me bitter. My failure made me cruel. Circumstances influence us deeply. Pain can shape the nervous system. Trauma can leave powerful impressions. These things should not be dismissed. But there is still another layer. What do you do with what happened to you? That is where responsibility begins. A wound can explain behavior without making every behavior wise. Pain can explain anger without making endless cruelty necessary. The past can explain why an attachment formed without requiring you to feed it forever. This is one of the deepest forms of karma in practical life. You inherit conditions, then you respond. The response creates another consequence and another impression. This is how the chain continues. Imagine someone betrayed years ago. The betrayal creates fear. Fear creates suspicion. Suspicion creates controlling behavior. The controlling behavior damages future relationships. Those damaged relationships then seem to confirm the original belief. People always leave me. Now one event has become an entire karmic pattern. The past created the wound, but repetition keeps the pattern alive. This is why awareness is so powerful. Awareness interrupts automatic karma. It allows the person to say, yes, I feel afraid, but I do not have to control. Yes, I feel angry, but I do not have to harm. Yes, I feel rejected, but I do not have to destroy my self-worth. That small pause is enormous, because the old impression has appeared, but a new response is being chosen. That new response creates a different consequence. This is how a karmic pattern can begin changing. This is also why spiritual practice matters before death. If you wait until the doorway to become aware of your patterns, you may discover that you spent decades strengthening them. But if you notice them while alive, you can begin creating different ones. This does not require becoming perfect. It requires becoming conscious. You will still become angry. You will still feel attachment. You will still make mistakes. But instead of repeating unconsciously, you begin observing. You apologize sooner. You repair faster. You notice when pride is controlling you. You catch resentment before it becomes identity. These changes seem small, but repeated over years, they can transform a person. This is why karma should not only frighten you, it should give you hope. If repeated action can create destructive patterns, repeated action can also create healing patterns. If you practiced anger, you can begin practicing restraint. If you practiced avoidance, you can begin practicing courage. If you practiced dishonesty, you can begin practicing truth. If you practiced self-neglect, you can begin practicing respect. The past shaped you. It does not have to dictate every next step. That is crucial. Otherwise, karma becomes fatalism, and that misses the point. A spiritually useful understanding of karma should make you more responsible, not more hopeless. It should make you realize that the next action matters right now, not someday. This is especially important at the doorway because the outer opportunities for action have ended. The physical life can no longer be revised in the same way. The conversation you avoided cannot be replayed exactly. The harm done cannot be undone by returning to the moment. The kindness given cannot be taken back either. The life has already created its impressions. This is why the doorway may feel like exposure. No more postponement, no more pretending. The life has already been lived, and perhaps consciousness stands before what that life created. This is a powerful spiritual image, not a courtroom, not a punishment chamber, a mirror. A mirror that asks, what did you repeatedly become? Did success make you more grateful or more arrogant? Did suffering make you more compassionate or more cruel? Did love make you freer or more controlling? Did loss make you wiser or more bitter? Did knowledge make you humble or proud? These questions are difficult because they do not allow performance. They look beneath appearance. And perhaps that is what the threshold does. It removes the audience. When there is nobody left to impress, what remains? This is why character matters more than reputation. Reputation is what people think you are. Character is what you practice when nobody is watching. The world may confuse the two. The doorway cannot. And this is the part that should speak most strongly to the listener. You are still building character now, today. Every ordinary choice is part of it. When nobody would know if you lied, what do you do? When you could humiliate someone and get away with it, what do you do? When someone weaker than you needs kindness, what do you do? When you are praised, what do you become? When you are ignored, what do you become? These moments are the real spiritual curriculum. They show what you are strengthening inside. This is Dharma meeting Karma. Dharma asks, what is the right responsibility here? Karma asks, what consequence does your response create? The two belong together. You face a situation. You choose. The choice shapes the next moment, then the next. Then, eventually, what once required effort becomes habit. This is why good character is not usually created through one dramatic act. It is created through hundreds of quiet decisions. The same is true for destructive character. A person rarely becomes deeply resentful in 1 second. They feed resentment repeatedly. They rehearse it, protect it, use it to explain everything. Eventually, the resentment no longer feels like something they have. It feels like who they are. That is the danger of samskaras. A repeated pattern can begin disguising itself as identity. I am just angry. I cannot forgive. I am naturally jealous. I am someone who never trusts. But perhaps these are not permanent identities. Perhaps they are practiced patterns. And practiced patterns can be changed through different practice. This is one of the most hopeful truths in the chapter. You are not only what has been impressed upon you, you are also the awareness that can begin responding differently. That means the karmic chain is not merely a prison. It can become a path of transformation. This also matters when we speak about rebirth. Within Vedic traditions that accept rebirth, karma and samskaras are often connected to the idea that the tendencies of consciousness influence future experience. Different traditions explain this in different ways, and we should not pretend to know every invisible mechanism with certainty, but the ethical message is clear. How you live matters beyond immediate pleasure. Your actions are not empty, they form something. Even if you completely set aside the question of another birth, this is already visible in this life. Your habits create your future personality. Your choices create your relationships. Your reactions shape your nervous system. Your repeated thoughts influence what feels natural. Karma is already working, right now. You do not need to wait until death to see consequence. This is why the doorway becomes so powerful as a symbol. It asks you to imagine reaching the end and discovering that the things you were most obsessed with were not the things that shaped you most deeply. You thought the important question was, how much did I achieve? Perhaps the deeper question was, what did chasing achievement make me? You thought the important question was, did people respect me? Perhaps it was, how did I treat people when I had power? You thought, did I win? Perhaps the deeper question was, what did winning cost my character? These are threshold questions, and they can change your priorities immediately. Because one day, every possession becomes irrelevant to your ability to keep living. But the person you spent your life becoming has already been formed through thousands of choices. This is why the final years of a life do not suddenly create the whole person. The whole life participates. Every season matters. Youth matters. Middle age matters. Old age matters. Mistakes matter. Repair matters. This should prevent another misunderstanding. Karma does not mean one mistake destroys your entire journey. If patterns can be strengthened, they can also be weakened. A person can spend years living selfishly and then genuinely transform. Another can appear virtuous publicly but become more corrupt inwardly. Spiritual life is movement. What matters is not only where you started, it is what direction you repeatedly choose. This is why repentance, repair, discipline, and conscious change matter. You cannot erase every consequence, but you can stop producing the same consequence. You cannot undo every wound, but you can stop creating new wounds from the same unconscious pattern. This is how the chain changes, and perhaps, at the doorway, this direction matters. Not because we can calculate the exact invisible result, but because consciousness has been shaped. This is why Chapter 6 should make you examine one thing more seriously than anything else. What pattern are you strengthening today that you would not want to carry to the end of your life? Maybe anger, maybe envy, maybe fear, maybe control, maybe the need to be admired, maybe resentment, maybe avoidance, maybe dishonesty. You do not have to fix your entire life tonight, but you should stop pretending the pattern is harmless simply because it is familiar. Repeated things become powerful. That is the warning. And repeated awareness becomes powerful too. That is the hope. There is another side to karma that people forget. Goodness also leaves momentum. The person who repeatedly helps others may become more naturally generous. The person who practices gratitude may become less controlled by comparison. The person who repeatedly chooses truth may become internally stronger. The person who practices forgiveness may become less burdened by resentment. These qualities may not make someone famous, but they can make the inner life lighter, and perhaps that is exactly the kind of preparation the doorway asks for. What makes the soul lighter? Not owning less alone, but being less possessed by what you own. Not having fewer relationships, but loving with less control. Not avoiding ambition, but refusing to build identity entirely around results. This is the practical meaning of spiritual preparation. You do not need to withdraw from life. You need to become conscious inside it. Build, love, work, create, but watch what those things are making you become. Because sometimes success strengthens arrogance. Sometimes failure strengthens humility. Sometimes wealth strengthens generosity. Sometimes poverty strengthens bitterness. The circumstance does not decide everything. Your repeated response matters. This is why karma is subtle. Two people can experience the same event and create very different inner consequences. And perhaps this is what the soul faces at the doorway, not merely a list of events, the pattern created through them. This is the sixth golden truth of the soul at the doorway. When everything external is left behind, what may matter most is not what happened to you, but what you repeatedly became through the way you responded to what happened. That is a powerful shift. The world asks, what did you own? The doorway asks, what owned you? The world asks, what did you achieve? The doorway asks, what did achievement make you? The world asks, who admired you? The doorway asks, who were you when nobody was watching? And perhaps that is why karma belongs at the threshold, because the doorway removes distraction. It strips away performance. It leaves the deeper pattern exposed. So while you are still alive, do not wait for that moment. Look now. What are your actions shaping? What are your habits becoming? What kind of consciousness are you practicing? Because the house may stay behind. The money may stay behind. The body may stay behind. But the impressions created through the way you lived have already gone deeper than any possession ever could. And perhaps when the soul finally stands at the doorway, it does not arrive empty-handed after all. Perhaps it arrives carrying the one thing it spent an entire lifetime creating, the pattern of what it became. Chapter 7, The Final Turn. When the soul may be ready to cross. There comes a point at every doorway when standing still becomes its own form of suffering. Behind the soul is everything it once knew, the body that carried it, the home that sheltered it, the family that gave it belonging, the relationships that shaped it, the ambitions that pulled it forward, the mistakes it wishes could be rewritten, and the memories that once formed the entire story of me. Ahead is something the old identity cannot fully understand. And perhaps this is the most important moment of the soul at the doorway. Not the moment when the body stopped, not the moment when the familiar world began falling away, but the moment when consciousness, within this Vedic-inspired spiritual lens, may finally begin turning toward what comes next. The word crossing can sound dramatic, as though there must be one visible bridge between two worlds, but the deeper crossing may be much more subtle. It may be the movement from attachment toward acceptance, from identity toward mystery, from continuously asking, how do I get back, toward finally becoming willing to ask, what is ahead? That is a much harder shift than it sounds. because moving forward means admitting that the old form will not return. The body will not restart simply because it was loved. The old morning will not come again. The unfinished conversation cannot be repeated exactly as it should have been. The house may remain standing, but the relationship with it has changed. The people remain loved, but the physical role once shared with them has ended. This is where the soul, symbolically, reaches a truth that every living person eventually encounters in smaller ways. Some doors close without asking whether you were ready. The deeper question is whether you remain standing before the closed door forever. Within Vedic-inspired traditions that accept continuity beyond death, the movement after physical life is often connected with karma, samskaras, attachment, subtle identity, rebirth, or liberation. Different teachings describe the details differently, and there is no reason to pretend that one simple map explains every soul. But across these ideas, one theme becomes difficult to ignore. Movement requires release. You cannot step fully into what comes next while demanding that what ended remain unchanged. And this may be the final challenge at the doorway. The soul may not be asked to hate the life behind it. It may be asked to stop trying to possess it. That difference is everything. Imagine someone standing beside a river, holding a handful of water. The tighter they squeeze, the faster the water escapes between their fingers. Life is often like that. We think holding harder will protect what we love, but sometimes the grip itself creates suffering. We grip youth, we grip relationships, we grip success, we grip identity, we grip people, we grip the future. And then time patiently removes each thing from the hand anyway. The spiritual lesson is not that you should never hold anything. It is that you should learn how to hold without believing the hand can remain closed forever. Perhaps the soul at the final threshold discovers this with complete clarity. Everything was received temporarily. The body was received. The family was received. The opportunities were received. The name was received. The experiences were received. The entire lifetime may have been more like a passage than a possession. And if that is true, then death is not merely an act of losing. It is the moment when ownership is exposed as temporary. This is why the word mine may become quieter at the doorway. My body becomes the body that was used. My house becomes the place where one chapter unfolded. My children become beings with journeys of their own. My reputation becomes a memory held by other minds. My plans become possibilities that were never guaranteed. This is not meant to reduce the value of any of these things. It actually reveals how precious they were. Temporary things deserve presence, not neglect. You do not value a sunset less because it ends. You value it more because it cannot be held. Perhaps life should have been understood the same way all along. This may be one of the soul's final recognitions before the crossing. Nothing needed to last forever in order to matter. The relationship mattered because it shaped love. The failure mattered because it exposed weakness. The loss mattered because it revealed attachment. The success mattered because it tested character. The pain mattered because of what consciousness did with it. The life does not need to be endless to have meaning, and perhaps this realization allows the soul to stop bargaining with what has already ended. Bargaining is one of attachment's final languages. One more day, one more conversation, one more chance. If only I had known, if only I had said this, if only I had done that. But there eventually comes a point where if only becomes a wall. The past cannot hear it. The doorway does not respond to it. The next movement begins only when the demand weakens. This does not mean regret suddenly disappears. It means regret changes function. Instead of saying, I must return and correct everything, perhaps the deeper lesson becomes, I now understand what that experience taught. This is how memory stops being only a chain and becomes wisdom. Perhaps the soul does not need to carry every event forward. Perhaps what matters is the impression created by how the event was met. A betrayal may leave bitterness, or it may eventually deepen discernment. A loss may produce fear, or it may deepen compassion. Success may produce arrogance, or it may produce gratitude. The event alone does not tell the whole story. The inner response matters. This is where Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 meet. Karma may describe the pattern created through action and consequence. The crossing asks whether consciousness can now move with what has been formed. If anger was repeatedly practiced, that tendency may have weight. If generosity was repeatedly practiced, that too may have weight. If attachment became identity, release may feel difficult. If non-attachment was practiced during life, perhaps letting go is less foreign. Again, we cannot prove an exact invisible sequence, but the ethical principle is powerful enough to transform a living person now. You are practicing your response to impermanence every day. Every disappointment is training. Every ending is training. Every time life says no when you wanted yes, something inside you practices either resistance or acceptance. Every time you lose control, something inside you learns whether it can remain steady. These moments are not the final crossing, but they may be rehearsals for the fundamental truth behind it. Life changes without asking permission. Can consciousness change with it? This is why the final turn is not only about death, it is about the courage to release any identity whose time has ended. Some people die physically only once, but emotionally they refuse dozens of smaller deaths. A relationship ends, yet they remain psychologically inside it for 10 years. A career ends, but they continue measuring themselves by the title they lost. Youth ends, but they spend the next decades fighting reality. A dream becomes impossible, but they refuse to build a new life because the old dream did not happen. This is attachment to form. And perhaps these smaller doorways reveal how difficult the final doorway may feel symbolically. We do not like endings. We call them failure. We call them unfair. We call them tragedy. Sometimes they are painful and unfair. But the spiritual question remains: what do you do when reality no longer offers the form you wanted? Do you remain at the doorway demanding that the past reopen? Or do you carry the lesson and turn? This is the courage of the final turn. Not forgetting. Not pretending the old world meant nothing. Turning. Perhaps the soul looks back one final time, not literally as a scene we can verify, but symbolically through the weight of all that was loved. The family, the home, the unfinished plans, the name. And maybe the final realization is not, none of this mattered. It is the opposite. It mattered enough to shape me, but it was never meant to imprison me. That sentence changes the entire meaning of death. The life behind does not become disposable. It becomes completed in form. This may be the hardest concept for the living to accept. We often confuse incompleteness with continuation. We think if a person died with unfinished business, the life itself was unfinished. But perhaps every human life ends with unfinished things. There will always be another book to read, another conversation to have, another place to visit, another relationship that could have been healed more completely, another dream that could have grown larger. If a life had to finish every possibility before death, no life would ever be complete. Maybe completion means something else. Maybe completion means the opportunity to live that particular form has ended. The body had its time. The relationships had their time. The choices were made. The consequences entered the world. The samskaras were formed. Now the form closes. That is a different kind of completion. And if the soul can recognize this within the symbolic journey, then perhaps the doorway stops looking like theft. It starts looking like transition. This is where fear may begin changing too. Fear loves the unknown because it can fill the unknown with anything. The mind says, I do not know what comes next, therefore I should be terrified. But not knowing does not automatically mean something terrible. It means the familiar map has ended. That is all we can honestly say. Vedic-inspired traditions may offer metaphysical possibilities about rebirth, karmic continuation, subtle realms, or liberation, but wisdom also allows mystery to remain mystery. Perhaps the soul does not need perfect intellectual knowledge to cross. Perhaps it needs something more fundamental: readiness to stop demanding certainty. This is a profound spiritual lesson even before death. Much of suffering comes from believing we must know exactly what comes next before we move. We want certainty before leaving the wrong relationship, certainty before changing careers, certainty before beginning again, certainty before forgiving. But life rarely gives that. Sometimes you must step because staying has become false, not because the entire future is visible. The doorway is the ultimate version of this truth. Behind is known but completed. Ahead is unknown but open. And eventually, the soul may need to trust movement more than familiarity. This is why surrender is different from defeat. Defeat says, nothing matters. Surrender says, I stop fighting what I cannot change so I can meet what comes next. One collapses, the other releases. Perhaps death requires this final surrender. The soul does not need to declare that life was worthless. It only needs to stop demanding that life remain in the same form. This is the crossing from attachment to acceptance. And perhaps acceptance is the actual doorway, not a gate made of stone, not a cosmic bridge, an inner shift. Behind it, consciousness says, I must remain what I was. Beyond it, I am willing to discover what remains when what I was can no longer continue. This is why identity was so central in Chapter 4. At the final turn, the soul may no longer be able to rely on the biography. The biography was the story. Perhaps the crossing asks whether consciousness can continue when the story no longer controls the entire meaning of existence. This is also where the idea of rebirth becomes interesting within Vedic traditions. If consciousness enters another life, then perhaps the old personality cannot simply be carried forward exactly as it was. A new body, new circumstances, new relationships, new challenges. If rebirth is part of the worldview, then clinging completely to the previous identity would itself become an obstacle to new experience. The old form must loosen for another form to become possible. And if liberation, rather than rebirth, is the deeper aim in some Vedic traditions, then attachment to identity becomes even more central. The question is no longer only which life comes next. It becomes whether consciousness can become free of the compulsive identification that keeps repeating bondage. This is why the doorway stands between more than two lives. It stands between two ways of being: clinging and release, compulsion and awareness, possession and freedom, fear and trust. That is what gives the title, The Soul at the Doorway, its deepest meaning. Perhaps everyone reaches many doorways, but the final doorway exposes all the lessons at once. Can you love without possessing? Can you remember without becoming trapped? Can you accept what remained unfinished? Can you face the consequence of what you practiced? Can you release the identity you defended for decades? Can you move without knowing everything that waits ahead? These questions form the true crossing. And there is something else the living must understand. If you spend your life refusing every smaller release, you may spend your life becoming heavier. Every resentment you refuse to release adds weight. Every identity you defend unnecessarily adds weight. Every relationship you try to control adds weight. Every possession you use to prove your worth adds weight. This is why spiritual practice often feels like subtraction. Less ego, less unnecessary desire, less control, less fear-driven attachment. Not because life should become empty, because consciousness becomes lighter when it no longer needs everything to confirm its worth. This is the kind of lightness worth practicing now. Imagine loving your family deeply without needing to dominate them. Imagine working hard without allowing your career to determine whether you deserve respect. Imagine enjoying money without becoming terrified of losing status. Imagine caring for the body without believing aging makes you worthless. Imagine having desires without turning every unfulfilled desire into suffering. This is not withdrawal, it is freedom within participation. You still live fully, but your hands are less closed. And perhaps a soul with open hands does not experience the doorway in the same symbolic way as a soul trying to drag the entire world through it. This image matters. Imagine arriving at the threshold, carrying bags filled with every resentment, every possession, every role, every unfinished demand, every identity, and every fear. Then the doorway is too narrow, not because some external force rejects you, because you are trying to carry a world that cannot go where you are going. The only movement possible is to put something down, then another thing, then another. The house, the title, the argument, the need to be remembered exactly as you want, the unfinished dream, the old body, even perhaps the fixed idea of who you were. And with every release, the doorway seems wider. Maybe the doorway never changed, maybe the burden did. That is one of the strongest images in this entire audiobook. What makes the crossing frightening may not be the doorway. It may be what we insist on carrying to it. This brings us to the deepest question of Chapter 7. If you knew you could not carry everything, what would you choose to keep? Not physically, in essence, perhaps compassion, wisdom, awareness, love, without possession, the lesson of suffering, the humility that came from failure, the gratitude that came from being loved. Maybe these are not things you carry like objects. Maybe they are qualities consciousness has become through practice. That is why Chapter 6 mattered so much. The soul may not carry a list of achievements. It may carry the pattern formed through them. This is what makes life meaningful. The temporary world becomes the place where character is formed. The house may be temporary, but what you practiced inside it matters. The relationship may be temporary in physical form, but what love taught you matters. The body may be temporary, but how you used it matters. The opportunity may be temporary, but the action you chose within it matters, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the soul does not need to keep the stage once the play has changed it. This is a beautiful way to understand release. You do not carry the classroom after the lesson, you carry what you learned. You do not carry every road you traveled, the road changed you through the journey. Maybe the life behind the doorway is like that. It was never meant to be packed and taken whole. It was meant to be lived. This should change the way the listener sees today. Stop trying to preserve every moment so aggressively that you forget to inhabit it. Stop treating life as something you can own. Life is happening. Your family is here now. Your body is alive now. The person you love can hear you now. Your choices still have consequences now. Use this moment, because one day the lesson may be all that remains meaningful from the form. This is where the 7th chapter turns completely toward you. What would you want your life to have taught you by the time you reach your own doorway? Would you want to discover that you spent decades learning how to compete, but never learned how to be peaceful? That you learned how to earn, but never how to be content? That you learned how to protect your pride, but never how to apologize? That you learned how to demand love, but never how to give it freely? That would be a heavy realization. But you are not at the doorway yet. That is the gift. You can still practice something different. You can change the pattern while the life is still active. You can release one resentment. You can make one courageous decision. You can speak one truth. You can repair one relationship. You can stop feeding one destructive attachment. These may feel like small actions, but all transformation begins in the next action. That is karma too. The next cause, the next consequence, the next impression. You are still creating. This is why a teaching about death can become strangely hopeful. The doorway is certain, but what kind of person approaches it is still being shaped. You do not control when every ending comes. You do influence what you practice before it arrives. That is enough responsibility for one lifetime. And perhaps when the final turn eventually comes, the deepest spiritual preparation is not having memorized every theory of the afterlife. It is recognizing impermanence without bitterness, recognizing love without possession, recognizing responsibility without endless guilt, recognizing mystery without panic. That would be a profound way to stand at any doorway. And now the soul, within the spiritual image of this audiobook, has reached that place. Behind it, the old world grows quieter, not erased. Quieter. The names remain behind. The memories remain behind. The family continues its own journey. The house stands beneath another sunrise. Life moves, and the soul may finally understand something it resisted from the beginning. The fact that life continued does not mean the life was forgotten. The fact that the soul moves forward does not mean the family was unloved. Movement is not betrayal. Release is not rejection. This is the seventh golden truth of the soul at the doorway. Perhaps the soul becomes ready to cross when it understands that moving forward does not require forgetting what was loved. It only requires releasing the demand that what was loved must remain unchanged forever. That is the final turn. The soul may look back, and instead of saying, "I cannot leave," perhaps the inner movement becomes, "This mattered. This shaped me. This was loved. And now I release the form." Then the soul turns. Ahead is mystery, perhaps rebirth, perhaps another stage of consciousness. Perhaps, within some Vedic traditions, a journey toward freedom beyond repeated identification. We should remain humble about what cannot be verified, but the spiritual truth of the doorway remains available to us now. Every life eventually asks us to release. The wise person begins learning how before the final moment. So when you think of the soul standing between this life and the next, do not imagine only darkness. Imagine a threshold where one great illusion finally begins weakening. The illusion that moving forward means losing everything. Perhaps nothing meaningful was ever truly contained only in the form. The person you loved changed you. The life changed you. The pain changed you. The choices changed you. The lessons became part of consciousness. Perhaps the form can therefore be released without declaring the journey meaningless. And maybe that is why the doorway eventually opens, not because the past disappears, because the soul no longer needs to live inside it. One world is behind, mystery is ahead. And at last, perhaps consciousness becomes willing to take the step it could not take while both hands were still gripping yesterday. Because the final crossing may not begin when the soul discovers exactly what waits on the other side. It may begin when the soul finally understands, there is nothing behind me that I must possess forever in order for what I love to have been real. And with that realization, the doorway is no longer merely the place where one life ends. It becomes the place where attachment ends its claim to be stronger than the journey. Perhaps you began the soul at the doorway, wondering what may happen when consciousness reaches the mysterious threshold between this life and whatever comes next. But, after walking through these 7 chapters, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. The doorway is not only waiting at the end of life. You are standing before smaller doorways every day. Every time something ends, every time a relationship changes, every time an old identity no longer fits, every time life asks you to release what you desperately wanted to keep, you are being taught the same lesson: love deeply, but do not imprison yourself through attachment. Within Vedic-inspired wisdom, death reminds us that the body is temporary, possessions are temporary, roles are temporary, and even the name people know us by belongs to one chapter of a much larger mystery. What may matter more deeply is what repeated experience has formed within us. Our tendencies, our awareness, our choices, our karma, and the qualities we practiced while life was still in our hands. One day, your house will belong to someone else. Your possessions will be moved. Your unfinished plans will no longer be yours to complete. The people who love you will remember your voice, your habits, your kindness, perhaps even your mistakes, and the world will continue. That truth can feel frightening, or it can make this moment precious, because you are not at the final doorway yet. You can still speak, you can still forgive, you can still repair something. You can still stop feeding the resentment that has already taken too much of your life. You can still tell someone that they matter. You can still become less controlled by approval, money, fear, status, and the need to possess everything you love. That may be the greatest gift hidden inside contemplating death. It teaches you how to live before living becomes impossible in the form you know now. Do not wait until the final threshold to discover that pride was too expensive. Do not wait until someone becomes a memory before realizing that an ordinary afternoon with them was sacred. Do not spend your entire life preparing for a future while missing the people standing beside you in the present. And do not believe that letting go means what you love did not matter. Sometimes the deepest proof that something mattered is that you allow its lesson to remain after its form has changed. Perhaps that is what the soul learns at the doorway. The family can remain loved without being possessed. The past can remain meaningful without becoming a prison. The unfinished story can remain unfinished without preventing movement. The old identity can be honored without being carried forever. And maybe, when all of that becomes clear, the doorway stops looking like a wall. It becomes an opening. Not because we can claim with certainty exactly what waits beyond death. Different Vedic traditions offer different understandings of karma, rebirth, subtle existence, and liberation, and some mystery remains beyond what ordinary experience can verify. But perhaps mystery itself is part of the teaching. You do not need to know every detail of the next world to become wiser in this one. You only need to understand what the doorway reveals about the life you are living now. Everything you hold will change. Everything you love deserves your presence. Every repeated choice is shaping you, and every day you are becoming someone. So ask yourself one final question. If you stood at the doorway tonight, what would you wish you had released sooner? The resentment? The fear? The need to prove yourself? The relationship you kept trying to control? The life you kept postponing? Whatever answer rises inside you, do not ignore it. That may be the real message of the soul at the doorway. Perhaps the greatest preparation for the next life is not obsessing over what happens after death. Perhaps it is making sure you do not reach death carrying a life you were too afraid to truly live. So love while you can, forgive while you can, become conscious while you can. And when something has completed its chapter, learn the courage to release its form without denying its meaning. Because one day, every human story reaches the same silent threshold. Behind you will be everything you once called mine. Ahead will be mystery. And perhaps the final freedom begins when the soul no longer asks, "How can I take all of this with me?" Perhaps it finally understands, "I was never meant to carry the whole world through the doorway. I was meant to let the journey change me before I crossed it."